You guys have been asking for it. Today we're going to teach and answer these questions. When do you push? How do tanks position? What happens when you're losing teammates? Where does my team position? And overall, just much more. If you don't know, Marvel Rivals Season 1 is out, and there are 2 new characters such as Reed Richards and Sue Storm from the Fantastic Four. And while this footage is from a prior tournament, I waited because the fundamentals will always remain fundamentals. We will learn from split decision making and how each moment really adds up, and how you can also learn to self-reflect and improve. So let's just get right into it. No matter what you're going to learn today is how to position, and we're going to utilize domination, and we're going to cover one round, and you're going to realize how a fight really comes down to specific moments. You see at the bottom we're circling each of these moments, and I promise you if you go back and look at your gameplay, the goal is for you to review those key moments and where things went right and where they went wrong. And we're going to discuss it. This is actually tournament footage. No matter what, no matter the season, this video will never go out of style. And if you enjoy it and you want us to be longer, cover more rounds, please leave a like, comment. I would love to do more of this because I'm learning with you. I'm not perfect either, and we're going to learn together. The first tip is to make sure that, especially at higher levels, is that your team does not stagger. Now, the biggest thing is that when we play this out, that they're going to be on top here, and all it takes is for one to make a mistake. The first fight, you're going to see the Bucky grab the penny, and we're going to review why that has a team fall apart and how each and every fight is very dynamic when they utilize their ultimates and so forth. So let's kind of break that down and let's take a look. We're going to watch from the Penny's POV and see what could have Penny done differently to even survive this encounter. So let's go and take a look.
2, 1.
Remember, you'll notice that even when they lose a fight, they ensure that they stay together. Now, that's the first mistake right there, was getting fantastic heals, but getting caught out not being behind the strange portal, and it's all they needed. Because once they got eliminated there, that really was it for them to start to trickle down their whole team. You'll notice that was a big mistake. So let's look back, and let's try to take a look moment to moment and slow that down. Because they're behind the strange portal initially, and everyone's waiting for this moment, and that's where they're running Bucky. I noticed that this team specifically is really focused on running Bucky to find this moment, to get somebody caught out. They're using Strange, because keep in mind, yeah, that they waited for the port to come down specifically, which is crazy, that timing. Let's take a look at this. And it's all moment to moment. You're wondering, well, how am I supposed to do this at my own level? Well, my biggest tip is to make sure that you catch whoever's out of position. Maybe they're grouped up or not grouped up. Let's say you're playing Groot, for example. If you notice that your team is grouped up and you have a Groot ultimate, you can capitalize on the fact that they are grouped together. But because there's no Groots that are tanks, well, you can see that everyone opts to pretty much tank up together and play together. So let's see that moment. Because what they're doing with the Strange, essentially here, is that there is no cover at the top, but they don't want to go low ground, because if you go on low ground, let's think this through a little bit. If you go on low ground, then you're easily going to be shot from above, and they can have better cover up here, right? They don't want to do that. That's not good. So everyone is trying to fight for the height, and they're using Strange because there is no cover here, but they're hiding behind their respected walls. And Bucky is essentially going to be the one that grabs them. Let's take a look. Also, the 2 teams that we're watching are Dying to Win and Honored Ones. It looks like they did pretty well because I'm looking at close to the finals. Let's take a look. So they're all pretty much grouped up. They're looking for them. Their Bucky is looking too at the same exact moment, but his doesn't hit. This goes down. And they're trying to, and the Penny is trying to hide behind. They're trying to essentially wait for that one moment to grab. And unfortunately theirs just gets off. So what can we learn here essentially together as we watch the fight break down? And let's go from the other POV of, let's say their Bucky waiting for that moment. They both played the same exact strat here, essentially. They said, you know what, let's play this out. And then once that happened and they fell and they started finding the weakness, everyone started to fall apart and just fall apart everywhere. Their team from Dying to Win is playing a lot more together here. Once they drop and they find the weak spot, and they can pretty much gather the point. The other team knows that they have to back up at this point and they can't stagger and lose any more. This team decides to push forward because they know they have the advantage, but everyone has respawned, which breaks out to the next fight. Bucky is using great cover here, by the way. Let's talk about Bucky's positioning. And you can do this for any range, and even if you're a melee, anything of that sort. So let's take a look at this in slow motion. Using cover like we discussed in our video, even if you're trying to use this cover to block as much so you can get behind cover and be healed and go back and forth, is really important. I know that he's taking a lot of damage, but it's better than standing out in the open, which is one of the biggest mistakes most casual players make, is just standing out in the open. If that Bucky got eliminated there, then the other team 100% would start pushing when they have the advantage. It's all about when you have the advantage and you have utility, it's whenever you push. And you start looking for position. You notice that the team overhead, let's take a look at that as we're going in slow motion here. It's kind of why I wanted to focus on one round specifically, because trust me, looking at all this, notice how they're all clumping up. And this team is starting to clump up and trying to move forward. Now, what we're looking at here is the second fight. We saw the first fight break out, and I'll try to timestamp this so it's really, you know, you can follow the logic and everything of like fight 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and realize that's pretty much how a fight breaks down. And so you're not staggering, right? You don't want to stagger ever in this game. And a lot of the tips that you find are actually applicable as well to Overwatch. So you actually find that Overwatch can be a really great tool, especially if I'm not doing this perfect. Keep in mind, I'm still learning myself, but when you look at these moments to moments, you'll see just how much of a big difference that it does make. Now, what this team does great is that they are holding the positioning here, and they're doing a great job of using Strange to create more space and cover, and their team is being dynamic, and their DPS are hiding behind them. Now, again, you're probably wondering, when do you push? And we're going to discuss that here in a second. We're going to slow this down even further. Because essentially what a dive character is for in terms of positioning melee. So we're going to go back just a few seconds here. And let's look at the Black Panther's POV. The dive is really here to find an opening. That's what the Black Panther's doing. You'll notice if you look from the overview, he's very separate from his team in a second, and he's going to go for a dive to try to create some sort of opening, maybe get like a pick. If he gets a pick, then it's a 5v4, and then the group of them can go up. You see how he's going in, it's unexpected. He tries to make a play. So let's back up and take a look at this, okay? So if you're ever playing a dive character, this essentially your role is to find the opportunity. Look how close he gets. And because of this, I mean, his HP is a little low. It's a little risky, right? But they're having a hard time getting him, and he does get out before it gets too messy. Now, here's a mistake that you can call it a mistake, that essentially what happens to the Bucky here. The timing of this. Now let's go ahead and pause here. Let's go ahead and pause and break this down, okay? Because most teams, what's very interesting of what they would do, and this is where you need to come save your teammates. Sometimes things happen where they get pulled in. Let's say a Wolverine will capture them. Anything of that nature could happen, right? Bucky was captured here, and the other 5 teammates could have left him. There's important things that you're going to see. You're going to see that the Strange will go in and dive as a tank to come rescue Bucky. Then afterwards, we're going to see Luna Snow really push in, and then everyone else starts to make a play to push in with the group. So let's take a look. Let's switch POVs. Take a look. This is still fight 2 now. And we're going to take a look how the Strange realizes what occurred and says, you know what? I'm going in for the rescue, and that's a moment to try to save your teammate rather than being passive. People ask the question, what do I do to save my teammate? This is a moment where you say, okay, well, let's dive and try to make a play. Even though this could have been extremely detrimental right here, at this point it could have been, okay, well, the fight's over, Bucky dies, leave him. No, there is an opportunity here to capitalize, and you're going to see how they turn this bad situation into a positive. So Strange moves forward and starts to help the Bucky as best as possible. And the Mantis, look at this. The Mantis actually comes in for the save to back it up. I thought it was a Luna, but it's actually the Mantis. The Mantis, great save, realizing we're pushing forward, and as a great counter, even though no utility was technically used as an ultimate, this moment gave the opportunity for them to actually push, because now Bucky has a reinforcement from the Mantis. And it's strange because most people would say, oh, that's a waste of utility, but making sure you don't lose key fights like this is where you use utility. So when you use utility from a healer perspective, so let's watch the Mantis back right there. Your utility can be used to counter big plays. And I would say that's a big play because it would have been a 5v4, right? When they see this. Now keep in mind, when you use healer ults to counter, let's say, Hela's ultimate, Bucky's ultimate, anybody's ultimate that does a high amount of damage. Now, this is to rescue somebody. Ready?
A nice deep freeze.
All right, let's take a look. Boom, the rescue comes in. And then all 3 of them are going in, and they're all pushing in, and Bucky's popped his ultimate and done a massive amount of damage here. And that cohesion of when to push. So if you're asking when to push, it could be to rescue a team, to make a play, when you see somebody's knocked, when you see somebody is low, if you're in comms with somebody and somebody says, I've done a lot of damage and the healer's low, tanks, that's your moment to hulk in, to go for the flank, for a dive to finish them off. Or if a dive has done a lot of damage and they feel pressure, don't alleviate that pressure and let them reset. They didn't let them reset at this point. They put all the pressure here and they ensured that they can maintain it as much as possible, and they reposition. Now, the big thing, once that fight is over, nobody's staggered in and running in, right? Let's go and play this fast forward now at this point. They're reconvening, they're not running in one at a time, and they're getting back together and saying, how can we make a play back, right? And you're going to see from the other team's mistake in terms of positioning, how even though they had somewhat good positioning, why the tank needs to be positioned in specific spots or play behind the tank. So they're grouping up together, which is great. Now we're going to watch the Bucky's POV, and we're going to slow it down, because this is where the fight next goes south. The Bucky's playing pretty confident. They've won 2 fights here, so there's not necessarily a bad reason to not play confident, but you'll notice, let's go and pause right here. Right, remember, that's why I say it's important to always play behind tanks, okay? The tank is technically here, and this is an off tank. I would say there's a difference between a main tank and an off tank. Off tanks are more like DPS oriented. Thor can go for a dive. Strange can kind of go for a dive, but he's got a gigantic wall, right? That wall is very, very important. Or let's say, for example, even Magneto can play more off tank to shield somebody, but you have your main tanks that are gonna boss up a lot of damage versus the ones that dive, like Venom, Thor. But that's kind of the trade-off here. So you want to hide behind, as a DPS, Doctor Strange. Ideally, that's your cover. That's additional cover, because if you're playing this cover and then you have a giant wall here, and this is where Invisible Woman can really come into play, and other characters, as the roster starts expanding, you can start to apply this logic to other areas, and it's really, really cool to kind of look at. So you see how Strange is here? We've already highlighted that, right? And Bucky is doing right by doing quick peeks, but because he's not hiding behind Doctor Strange, he does go down, and because of that, the Strange now has to front a lot of this damage and realize they got picked, and they have lost a DPS, meaning that a lot of their damage is pretty much getting soaked. And because of this, they lose a lot. And of course, the bridge gets taken out, they get split up, and now is the moment for the other team to make a push forward. Once they got that pick, it becomes clear we need to start putting pressure and make sure we don't alleviate it, because you have the advantage. The team has the advantage. They're all healthy. They're all doing great. They all have the ability to push forward. If they just stalled there and didn't push forward, well, then you're not going to gain any ground and any momentum. So now this team has the advantage, and they're holding here. Now, if you're this team, what's the biggest things you can anticipate that the enemy team is going to do, right? You know, overhead, let's take a look overhead, right? That they're going to bunch up, which is what they do, and they're probably going to use some sort of utility to come back in. They're going to use either a Strange ult, sometimes they'll use maybe like a Thor ult to kind of find some positioning, anything of that nature. So let's take a look at what they decide to do here. But all those are key moments as they start to push in. Ultimates are anticipated, so if you're defending, you need to anticipate that they're going to use those ultimates. And you can tell, see, Strange on the bottom right already has his ultimate, and he's ready to use it, actually. It's ready to be utilized, and it's ready to go. So let's take a look at where they use their ultimates and the timing of this, right? So Thor, as we mentioned, being a dive here, let's break this down. This is great. It's great stuff happening right now. Switch to Thor. Remember I had mentioned that a tank, and this is important for tanks. Now, you got to make sure that you're not afraid to push, okay? But you're also being respectful and knowing where your team is. Now, because they're all in comms, they know that their DPS is behind them. But they know they have to make a play, and Thor is fantastic at doing this, along with any other dive tank. It's why, you know, Venom could be stronger, but just why you kind of opt for other tanks. Penny can be great for holding defensively, this is an example, as more of an off tank. So here's the opening, trying to create it, but they also, because of that, managed to make sure that they got the Luna ult out. Which is why Luna popped her ult here, ready? She's popping her ult here because she needs to counter this, because a lot of damage is about to come in, right? You also hear Penny popping her ult defensively at this point. which is what they're anticipating. So we're trading a lot of ults here to counter one play, to counter another. It's almost like playing chess at this level. It's like, I took your rook, I'm taking your bishop, my pawn is still there. You know, there's a lot of trading back and forth, and you have to make sure that your trades make a whole lot of sense. This is a lot of mistakes that supports make, where they pop their ultimate and they're not doing it for any real reason. Otherwise, this wouldn't have been countered. So the Thor does go down. And let's see what comes next. And unfortunately, they lose this fight. That's not bad. They made a lot of trades and they got a lot of damage out and they went for something. So let's try to take a look what went wrong for this team per se. And guess what? The beauty here, you'll notice that they back up and that they're making sure not to go for a clean wipe and that they're staggering again. That they don't stagger, excuse me. If they were to stagger here, that probably could have costed them. They realized that they made a play and it didn't work per se. So let's take a look from the other team. I think they just timed their ults better in terms of saving the team. And yeah, popping Penny ult, but at least they got that done. Because now when the next push comes in, they don't have the utility and they have to make sure that they play it safe. Let's take a look again now that they come back in, because they still have more utility. They didn't just pop everything. They made sure, okay, what can we do? You didn't see Strange just go in and pop it, because at that point they got the Luna ult, they got the Penny ult. What do they have left at their disposal is not very much at this point. Especially, it looks like, you know, with one healer specifically and 3 DPS. So they come up ideally. Oh, man, this is massive right here. This ult, there you go. Strange can be great, can be fantastic at creating openings like this. Now, if they had another healer that overlaid an ultimate, and I for a second there I was like, are they running 3 DPS or not? So this is why 2 healers are so important when playing at a certain level, is that Luna's ult can be down. But what about this? Now, what this team is doing specifically is that the downside of Rocket can be a really strong character, but is not as strong as Luna's ult, Mantis's ult, in terms of making sure that you block this. Let's say, for example, they knew that Strange was coming in. Rocket's ult is not going to do as much, unfortunately. His ult can amplify damage, but it can't mitigate the amount of DPS that Strange is going to do when he comes in. What this team is doing is that they are using Rocket ult to amplify their Punisher and their Bucky to give them more power in a fight. The downside of what this team is missing compared to this team is that they do have a dive with Black Panther. And they have some sort of poke, which is what worked when they were dealing with the Black Panther. Now, it could have gone the other way, especially whenever Rocket is throwing the tactical, is that they're using that as a burst of spike damage. Now, unless their healers mitigate that. So that's the plus side and downside depending on what comp you're running. And this is why people switch things up depending on those tactics, and they'll switch it up in future rounds. Now, in this round, if it didn't work, that's when you say, okay, you know what? We tried this play, they're ready for our counter. And it's just like, it's funny, as you watch all the scribbles on screen, it's like you're watching a football or something, right? You're watching the play-by-play and what people can do. But the Strange did fantastic work here, coming in, going with the ultimate. And the thing is that you know that it's coming. If you're playing any game, it's like you know that a third party's coming in a battle royale. You know that they're going to have their ultimates. That it's not a surprise. Oh, they Luna ulted. Well, yeah, they're going to, because that is a great way to counteract their push. If you're enjoying this so far, leave a like, leave a comment. I'd love to do more. I'm keeping this pretty tight for the first one. And this team played it pretty smart by coming in. The only downside of this enemy team, let's look at their POV, is that they're really split as they came in. They did a Hail Mary, but you'll notice just how split up they were on this push. I think the port was really smart that they did here. It's just they kind of got picked off one by one, somewhere on height, somewhere on low ground. Instead of resetting on height, Bucky went for the low ground. Some people were left on height, some people were left down below. Their team was better at taking the height and playing that, and they're able to get more solid picks. Let's take a look at the other POV. And there they go, yeah. Everyone is just kind of split up playing their own game, and the other team had a lot more cohesion, and they're able to do that because of their ultimates keeping together, and it pretty much got them the win there. Let's take a look at that POV and see how Luna keeps everyone together. So they drop, stay together, right? You see this, how they're trying to stay together here? And they do pop the ult as well. We got to find the exact moment. And this is where you can look at your VODs. And it can be harder to find when you're looking at the upper levels. Let's see, who gets dropped first? Their Luna. So their Luna must have gotten caught out somehow. Let's take a look, because losing Luna can be pretty bad early on. So Luna drops in, they go for the point, they know they have to. I remember seeing somebody up top. Yeah, Luna essentially is like over here, getting DPS down, while their other team is kind of pushing. The Luna, they know to focus that Luna. And let's look at a bird's eye view of this. Let's kind of like free cam it and just watch the end of this fight. Let's take a look, shall we? Okay, so I found the moment, and this is really where they were pretty close. And I want to rewind it because there was a staggered moment here. And we found it. Here it is. Ready? They poured in, and we're going to look at all of this. Ready? So I'm just going to leave the camera here because this is probably the best spot. You'll notice that their Punisher gets caught out, right? And let's go ahead and drop just a little bit here. And since their Punisher gets... I mean, there's no damage going out to finish anybody. And their Bucky tries to Hail Mary it, but because the Luna counters with the ultimate, it becomes pretty much a net zero at that point. They all needed to go on point and then isolate somebody out immediately, and because they weren't able to do that, they got split. And compared to the other team, they were able to single out the Luna on their end because they knew who to look for first to have things fall apart. I guarantee if the other team focused on the Luna, then we would have looked at a whole different area because their ultimate would have been taken out. But because one stayed on height, 5 dropped, it was like a 5v6 down below. The Punisher got isolated out. They took out their DPS. They had 1 true DPS left remaining, and it just wasn't enough to clutch out. So if you found this really informative and helpful, please let me know. I'd love to do more of these. I didn't want this one to be too long at the start, just because I wanted your feedback and let me know what you want more focused on. But my goal is to make sure that when you step away, that you feel confident to review your own VODs. And I'll get better at controlling the camera and doing this, but I want you to go look at your own gameplay, to ask yourself the questions: was I isolated from my team? Was I positioned behind the tanks? Did I play my role as a dive? Did I push behind? Was I too far extended as a tank? Were my healers close enough? Was I LOS? Did I rescue my team? What did I counter? All these are very, very important questions depending on your role, and it all has to do with team play and positioning. People will obsess about aim, but I promise you, if you want to improve, and as much as I'm also learning too, I can't tell you how much counters, counter picks, what your team composition is, matters immensely, even as we look at this next round, as they're switching things up to try to, like, I see right here, they're running Namor, meaning that they're trying to counter the dive, and that matters immensely. If you want more of this, please comment. I'm excited. I'm truly passionate about this. We have more coming. We're going to learn from my mistakes as we improve in this game, and I want to share that journey with you so you can improve as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you guys all in the next one.